Hello, my friends. Adam Bush here. If you know anything about me, you know I'm a big church guy. Growing up, I was always in church, whether it was sitting on the front row when my parents were children's pastors. Sidebar, this is a picture of my dad. My mom is the one wearing those devil hands, so I like to say this is my favorite photo of my parents. Or when they planted their own church. I've made my greatest friends in church. I have my best memories in church. I love church. In fact, one of the things I love the most is when my dad would preach, he would share stories, especially funny stories. I loved those. And after a while, I realized I was a pretty good storyteller as well. And so stories and jokes began seeping into every part of my life. Like one time in high school, my teacher said, Adam, read the next definition in the book. So I read, circumference, the distance around something. Circumference. And then for no reason, I said, not to be confused with circumcision. Like it's not a great joke, but to an audience of 14-year-olds, brought the house down. Right then, this really popular girl, she leaned over to me and she goes, "You're pretty funny, Bush." I lived off that emotionally for a year. After high school, I got a job in children's ministry at my church. I would perform on stage, write sketches, create puppet characters. I loved it. One time I was at a conference and this lady came up to me and she said, "Hey, you're Adam Bush. At our church, we think you're awesome." That feeling from high school came right back. From there, I got really into storytelling and writing. I started meeting other storytellers that worked at Sesame Street, and Disney, and Pixar. And then I started flying around teaching other people how to tell stories. One time I was on a flight and the flight attendant said, "Where are you headed?" I said, "I'm going to teach a storytelling workshop at NASA." And there that feeling came again. From there, I started dreaming about making my own television show. My friend and I, we came up with an idea for a television show for preschoolers. We created all the characters, the storylines, the world, and we made something called a pitch deck, and I started flying out to Los Angeles to pitch our show. I was going out there so much that eventually I thought, if I'm gonna make my dream happen, I'm gonna have to live out here. So my wife and I, we quit our jobs, sold our house, and packed up to move to Hollywood. A couple of weeks before we were supposed to move, I started getting this uneasy feeling like maybe we weren't supposed to go. I told my wife about it, how I was scared that if we don't go, I'll feel like I had lost my shot. She looked at me and said, "Sounds like you don't trust God with your career." And like that, I said, "Oh, I don't trust God with my career." Well, crap. So we stayed. Got our jobs back, and I started saying out loud, "God, I will stay in Tulsa, Oklahoma for as long as you want." I even stopped working on my show altogether, which was really hard because it felt like letting a dream die. 2 years later, I got an email from the head of a new network. He said, "We're looking for a show that is further along than an idea, but not quite finished yet," which is exactly where my show was. So I flew out to California, and we brainstormed about what the show could be, and they brought in consultants from Disney to talk about how to make a show. And at the end, they bought my show. That night, I was sitting in my hotel room at the desk, writing on the show, when it hit me. Oh my gosh, I totally did it. I sold a show. But that feeling that I was expecting, it never came. Instead, honestly, I felt really sad because I was by myself. I was lonely, I was missing my family and my friends who were all back home, my community. And then I felt God reveal something to me, and this has not happened to me very often in my life. But it was as if he said, "Adam, if you would have moved out here, this is how alone you would have felt all the time. Stop chasing that feeling and start finding fulfillment in your relationship with me and the community that I've put you in." You know, when I look back on this story, I know what that feeling was now. It was status. More than I wanted to be funny in high school, I wanted to be known as a guy who was funny. More than I wanted to learn from people at Disney, I wanted to be able to say, "I know people at Disney." And more than I wanted to make a show, I wanted to be known as a guy who made the show. The truth is, I got all that. And I was left wanting. So now, when that old feeling from high school tries to creep back in, I run to Jesus and I run fast. I ask God to remind me that I am His son, a son whom He wanted to be a good storyteller, but His son first. And also a son who is part of a family, that He intentionally placed me here, not just within my family of origin, but with friends who have become my family. And that's what the church is. It's what it's been for me, a place where I have found real, authentic community. Like when I lost my job, or when my daughter was born, or when I had a mental breakdown because I felt the weight of the world caving in around me. Through marriage spats, through wonderful celebration in my life, and terrible sorrow. These are the relationships that have been with me every step of the journey. And if I had moved to Los Angeles when God was telling me to stay, I would have missed all that. Look, I get it. It is easy to take for granted the place and community where God has put you, especially if you've been there for a long time. I did it. And this is not a story about not following your God-given dream. It's just that sometimes it looks different than you expected. Like my story. What God had for me was right here, within this beautiful community. And I think that's pretty amazing.